Another video here to cover kind of advanced logic within forms. So a previous video covered basic simple logic that you can put into place. Just remember, logic has two parts. There is a trigger, what is going to make the logic begin, and an action or multiple actions, what happens once that logic has been triggered. In this case, we will go over triggering based on a few different methods, as well as the updates being diverse, right? So property updates, value updates, schema updates, etc. So you'll see kind of a single form that has all of those in place. Just to quickly look at the form, this form has two fields that interact or influence the logic. So the first field here is just a select button. The second is a number, right? So the user enters a number. Based on that, we're going to do something dynamic with this choice. So let's kind of look at what we have configured from a logic point of view here. If I check the logic, you'll notice that there are three advanced logic situations configured. I've tried to name them in a way where it's pretty easy to tell what's going on. So in this case, this one is triggered based on some JavaScript. Then we're just doing kind of a basic property update. And it's going to be done whenever we have Apple as the choice for select option 1. The second one is going to be triggered based on some JSON trigger, and we're going to do an actual value update. And this will be triggered based on the orange field in select option 1, plus a few other things. And the third one is just a simple trigger. We went over simple triggers in our last video, so we don't need to really dig into that. But we'll be performing a schema update, and this one will focus on kind of the banana for select option 1. So let's dig into the first one and kind of take a look at what we see. So in this scenario, if we see that the result of select option 1 is Apple and the data.number is greater than 50, then we're going to update the placeholder as well as update the label. So in this case, this is really flexible because I can now look at two different fields, and only if both fields are compliant, I can update or perform an action. Now, I could also put an OR statement in here. I can make this a little bit more complex if I want, and that's kind of the beauty of doing it with a JavaScript trigger. So we'll go ahead and take a look at the second, which is going to be a JSON trigger. And you'll notice that this one is actually taking multiple fields into place as well. So in this case, we're going to say, hey, if the value for data select option is orange and we have the value for data number greater than 50, then we're going to perform these updates. Now, the first one here is kind of unique. This is going to be a JavaScript value update. And what we're doing is we're going to just update the actual value in the block to say, wow, the number in that was entered is a lot of oranges in this case, right? So it gives us the flexibility to actually pre-populate values based on choices or decisions. This could be really useful if you're trying to come up with like a host name based on a bunch of choices or a safe name based on a bunch of choices. You can automatically create that based on what the user chose, and you can pre-populate a field so that the user doesn't have to type that field in. Now, the last one we'll look at is just a simple trigger. In this case, we already looked at simple triggers in the last example, but the difference is we will be updating this via a schema, and we're also going to remove a value from the property field if it already exists. So this is new. And I'll explain why once we do the form, but basically all it does is set the value back to empty, okay? Now, the first one where we're updating via schema is basically we're going to go in and update the placeholder. We're also going to update the label, and this is kind of what the schema format looks like. So if you wanted to update the label, which is going to be the part that is on the top above the field, the placeholder is obviously the placeholder. You could also add things in here like the tooltip and things like that. But this allows you to update them in kind of like a JSON schema format. So you just provide the updates that you want in this JSON and it will put them in place. So let me go ahead and cancel here, and then we will run the flow. when we do, we'll go ahead and start with the first option, right? The first option was Apple. Notice that nothing happens here. If you remember, we had a JavaScript select in place, or a JavaScript trigger that also looks for a number. Now, if I enter 49, nothing happens. However, if I enter 51, we get that update. Remember, the JavaScript I had in place said this had to be equal to Apple and the number had to be greater than 51. We then updated the placeholder with this is a ton of apples, and we updated the label to say Apple Man. Now, I will go ahead and remove the number, and you'll notice that this clears back up, so that placeholder gets removed, and we'll change it to orange. Again, nothing happens. And again, if I put in like a number 45, nothing happens. However, if I put 455, we've now updated the actual value in this field to say, wow, 455 is a lot of oranges. Note that this is the value because it's actually a darker color. When it's just a placeholder, it's kind of that lighter gray. Now, what if I want to change this back to Apple? I change it back to Apple and we note that the label updated. However, the value did not go away. Once you set the value, if you want to remove it, you need to, in your actions, remove it specifically. So if you remember, on the last trigger, which was banana, I had an additional action that clears the value. So if I select banana, there's no number requirement here because this was just a basic simple trigger. You'll notice that the value is removed, and that's because that second action was clearing the value. And I now see the placeholder which says you chose banana, and we have the label as Banana Man. I can now go back to Apple and go back and say Apple Man, etc. So just be careful if you want to be able to overwrite fields. Once you've written in the value, they will not dynamically update unless you overwrite, or you got to overwrite that value with an action. So that's a quick video on kind of advanced logic. Again, very useful for dynamically updating your forms, changing labels, changing placeholders, tooltips, etc., based on what users have selected.